So there's plenty of talk in the tech industry right now about jobs disappearing. There is very clearly a problem, but when I dug into it, I saw that there is one group that's impacted more than others. And whilst AI would be expected to have contributed to this, it was not quite in the way that I had imagined, by the AI doing your job better than you. Let's take a little look at that in this video. This article talks about in-demand sectors. It does talk about the fact that a lot of the losses of jobs are coming from entry-level jobs like customer services and other easy-to-automate roles. It mentions that Klarna announced cuts to its customer experience and marketing departments shortly after revealing a major AI chatbot rollout. Cisco trimmed 4,000 roles to focus on AI-enabled networking. Duolingo, despite strong growth, cut staff as it leans into automated content generation. But some positions are also opening up, with those being roles that require more skill, despite AI tools also augmenting such roles, such as product, software, cybersecurity, DevOps roles, and the like. It mentions that Salesforce has opened dozens of new roles in AI product strategy, for instance. Even Amazon, after recent cuts, is recruiting for machine learning engineers and data architects. So you can start to build up the idea that if you looked at the amount of resource and focus going into AI projects, that AI is indeed replacing developers. But an interesting take discussed in this video is that it is the investment, the money going to AI projects rather than the software engineering projects, that has had the knock-on effect on tech jobs, as opposed to direct automation from AI products. This post refers to an article complaining about the lack of job security in the tech sector. You can see comments with users complaining about the job market and how it's lost its stability, with others pointing out that it was never really stable to begin with. For example, in the 90s, there were attempts at outsourcing development to low-cost geographies. The reality from my own experience and those of my friends is that over the last 20 years or so, if you were even remotely competent, it was indeed very stable. I am of course in the UK, but I think the same could also be true of the US. I rarely knew anyone that was out of a job, at least from my colleagues and friends circle. This recent article talks about the fact that 155 billion with a B US dollars has been spent on AI this year. It mentions that Meta's year-to-date capital expenditure amounted to $30.7 billion, doubling the $15.2 billion figure from the same time last year, per its earnings report. For the most recent quarter alone, the company spent $17 billion on capital expenditures, double the same period in 2024, $8.5 billion. Alphabet reported nearly $40 billion in capex to date for the first 2 quarters of the current fiscal year, and Amazon reported $55.7 billion. Microsoft said it would spend more than $30 billion in the current quarter to build out the data centers powering its AI services. Microsoft CFO Amy Hood said the current quarter's capex would be at least 50% more than the outlay during the same period a year earlier, and greater than the company's record capital expenditures of $24.2 billion in the quarter to June. Now you may be thinking, well, surely some of that would be spent on developers, and indeed it would be, but a lot of it is concentrated on particular extremely high paid roles, so not contributing to large numbers of more moderately compensated roles. The pay discussed for some of these roles is absolutely astronomical, as you can see, for example, in this article, whether they need the talent or just want to make sure that it doesn't go to the competition. A lot of the funding for AI would actually go to building huge data centers, not to mention the energy costs of training these ever more hungry models. Now, there's not an infinite amount of money, so 155 billion US dollars of capex going to such projects. A large proportion of this would have likely gone to ambitious software projects prior to the AI boom. Now, coming back to the jobs market, we can see who is affected using this handy layoffs tracker from Crunchbase. You can see some quite notable companies that have had layoffs, some of the bigger numbers coming from Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta, as you might imagine. Now, this article paints a particularly bleak picture. It talks about a software engineer called Sean Kay. In March 2024, K42 was a full-stack engineer at FrameVR.io. His superiors encouraged employees to use ChatGPT, and team productivity skyrocketed. A month later, he was laid off. He'd been in the industry for 21 years and was making $150,000. With 2 mortgages to cover, he started using DoorDash to do deliveries around his home in central New York, just to make ends meet. After more than a year and nearly 800 applications, he finally landed a contract position earlier this month. Kay believes AI will make some tech jobs obsolete, but the worker still has a place. He said, AI is a better programmer than me, and that doesn't mean that I think that I have no value to offer anymore. I just think that means I can now do 100 times as much of what I was doing before and solve harder problems that I wouldn't have even attempted before. I'm really convinced that anybody whose job is done on a computer all day is over. It's just a matter of time. These are his words, not mine. This article shows where we are with the hiring trend, and you can see the dip from the pandemic, but a massive recovery with where we are now being lower than if the trend had continued. But it's not such a bad picture when you look at the present. The issue is really the direction of the trend. This website shows the number of open jobs on this chart, and looking at the trend, it doesn't actually look too bad. We can also look at tech layoffs, and this paints a slightly different picture with July looking particularly bad. By the way, I will link to some of these websites in the description below. Now, interestingly, this article talks about the real issue, and that is entry-level jobs. It mentions a drop in entry-level jobs of 32% as AI use increases. There's a quote here from Hans de Visser, CTO at Mendix, which is part of Siemens. The graduate job market is undergoing seismic change, particularly in tech. The promise of a good job following a good degree from a respectable university once felt guaranteed, and today it is anything but. A heady cocktail of hiring freezes combined with a rapid rise of AI adoption and employer cost cutting has made it far tougher for recent graduates to get a foot on the career ladder. Just take a look at this post about entry-level experience where the user complains about the difficulty in getting a role. One of the users says that this was back in the day, now things have changed, people with degrees and experience are struggling to find jobs. The market is kind of hard, not trying to discourage, keep applying, and I wish you the best. This article from the BBC mentions that even when junior roles were advertised, they often demanded 2 or more years of professional experience. This echoes some of the Reddit comments I've seen that when they say entry-level jobs, they are now really wanting 3 to 5 years of experience. So the situation could be even worse than the stats show. This article mentions that university graduates in the UK are facing the toughest job market since 2018, figures suggest, as employers pause hiring and use AI to cut costs, according to analysts. There's a study here from Stanford, which I became aware of because of a video from TechLead, and it mentions the impact on jobs from AI directly. Now, the study mentions that there is a very real effect from AI, but it is concentrated, disproportionately affecting the young. They say that this holds true even after accounting for other factors like the impact of remote work. Another smaller but interesting takeaway is that there is not much impact on pay, rather it is the number of roles that are affected. Also, a lot of problems are in areas which are susceptible to automation, but roles where AI plays a supporting role, such as software engineering, show little to no decline. So I think we can say from this that cases where AI is directly replacing those with experience is pretty rare in most cases. So not a case of a coding agent replacing an experienced software engineer. In reality, it is the effect of a huge amount of capex going into AI projects, which do not generate the demand for more typical software engineers compared to large projects in the past. However, those that are more directly affected by AI products and investments would be those whose skill is more readily replaceable, or even perceived to be replaceable by AI, which is those who are new to the job market, i.e. recent graduates. Let me know if you or your role is affected and what you think in the comments below. And if you do not want to be the last to know about important AI, tech, and programming news, make sure to hit subscribe. Thank you for watching.